Get me started. Don't get me started. I don't want to rant right now. I
No,
don't want to rant.
start it.
No. Get the. Let me mute.
I don't want to rant, but y'all want me to rant because I swear, oh man, what the hell is wrong with the freaking liberal left loonies? What the hell is wrong with them? Why they don't feel good about themselves? Why you can tell them people like them have been bullied growing up, so they use their little power and little political science to try to bully us. So who the hell is they? I'm telling y'all, I'm not making this up. I see it. I don't care. My job can come to my YouTube right now. My job is trying to fire me right now, and I will come right back after them. I will. They hate me because of my political views, but I see more hate in the last 2 months than I've seen in my 46 years of my life. Like, we got to come against that hate. The thing is, we will come against that hate. As long as we have love, we will come against that hate because we are winning. That's why they're mad. They're mad because we are winning. And let's keep on winning. Look, do they know? Not saying it's going to be a blue wave. If it was a blue wave, we still win. We still win. The one world government is eventually going to happen. The new world order is eventually going to happen. God sent Trump here to slow it down. I'm done. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're bigots. They're bigots. Simply put, the left, the liberal mob, the hate mob, they're bigoted. Plain and simple. And yeah, anyone that's in their path that is even friendly with Trump, anyone that refuses to say anything bad about Trump gets raked over the coals. Look how they treated Kanye West. All Kanye West did was put on the Trump hat.
That pisses me off.
Why don't we try loving him? Why don't we try love? You can't respond with hate and expect to get a different outcome. You respond with love. And look how they treated him. Look how they treated Tiger Woods just because Tiger Woods said, you know, I respect the office of the president. I don't care who's in there. That's pretty much what Kanye said. They did it to Jimmy Fallon. They're like, you're not attacking Trump enough. You touched his hair a few years ago. You made him into a human. You treated him like a person. We need you to participate in this tirade, this ongoing hatred of Trump. And that's another thing people are seeing too. They're like, yeah, Trump's actually doing some good stuff too. Yeah, he shoots from the hip and he says a lot of crazy things, but there's no reason for you to flip out over him every single day. Life kind of goes on. Your life doesn't have changed because he's president.
Who don't say crazy things? Don't we all say crazy things? I mean, we all say crazy things. I love Trump because he say crazy things. I mean, come on now. We got to say some crazy thing to shake this country up.
All right. So blue wave, red wave. I mean, obvious, but what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to, I'm just saying this first. What do you think is going to happen if the Democrats win, if it's a blue wave? I'm just being hypothetical. I'm trying to be fair. The reason, let me take the reason I'm also just trying to not focus on that scenario, just put that scenario out there is just a kind of an act of being humble, because I noticed how the left acted before Trump won, right? There was lots of video compilation of them laughing and saying that he wasn't going to win and that they were going to win and that Hillary was ahead. And, you know, their hubris just made them look like complete idiots. So I just want to, are you guys going to be mad, sad? Are you going to go out and riot? Do you think there are going to be riots if the blue wave happens?
No.
I mean, there'll be some red waves. There'll be some.
We don't do that.
No.
Depends on what state you're in.
Makes us no better than them.
Well, I'm not saying you're going to personally go out and riot. I'm picturing Zach out there rioting.
I'm going to go out there in Kevlar, but yeah.
I've already picked out the cars I'm going to burn up, and, you know, I already have my riot gear.
I got my spray paint and my mace ready.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my chant ready. I already know what I'm going to hey, ho, ho.
Oh my God, I saw that video. I could not believe that was a real thing. That poor old guy. I mean, I don't feel bad that I just feel bad that he just had to stand there by himself. Like, it's just crazy.
What happened?
You didn't see that video? There's like this old guy holding up like Trump signs, and there's these two sort of younger looking individuals who thought it'd be a good idea to dance around him and chant. It's just, it's at this point, it's so silly. I can't take any of these protesters seriously. Like, I mean, you ask a lot of these people why it is they protest what they protest. A lot of them can't give you a straight answer, and I can speak from firsthand experience. You ask people why they don't like certain things, I just don't bother with it because there's no sense in it anymore. People are clearly delusional or don't know why it is they're there. They're just there because, well, you know, support all women.
Well, their anger and their insecurities and their trauma is being weaponized against them. That's how I see it. And a lot of them are angry about their own self.
I mean, it's that, and it's the virtue signaling. It's the virtue signaling to the highest degree. A lot of these people, at least from my experience, you talk to some of these protesters, it's like a white, like, male feminist or like a white hip. I'm speaking from my area. And it's like I see it more with those people than anybody else. That's usually where it's just a little bit where I don't really understand why you're so angry. It's like, what did they do to you personally, to you? And that's usually where it angers me the most. I'm not really saying that everybody out there doesn't have a right to assemble or protest, but it's like a lot of these folks don't even have a really good reason. And you're like the whitest of the white bunch, and you virtue signal all day and every night. And that's where it's a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion. So.
You know what I think it is? I think it's like how I feel like a lot of Black liberals, I feel like they somewhat kind of think that feel bad about themselves in a way. Like that's why they always holler oppression. And I start to think that the white liberals, they kind of feel bad about, like, they've been made to feel bad about like slavery, and they've like taken it upon themselves. And I saw on this channel, Red Elephants. Remember that article that came out? It was a guy talking about would he let his kid be friends with white kids? He was Black, I guess. And
yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, and they're asking people, like, is this okay? Like, so this guy went on the street and he asked white people. The white liberals, they all said, no, yeah, it's okay. And then he asked Black people, and they're like, no, that's not okay. Why would you do that? And so he said it was kind of funny because it's like the white people, like, none of them, like, for some reason, none of them could admit that it was wrong. Like, they were just like, well, okay, well, you know, they're Black. I understand, you know. And it's just like the same mentality that's put on Black people. It's put on white liberals, too. And they have the same problem. It's just that they have this guilt for some reason that they've taken on.
You know, the funny thing is, if you don't mind me expanding on this a little bit, a lot of the times is that the white oppression thing is a very real thing that people will always use. And I'm talking about white people here specifically when they talk about their own privilege, acknowledging that. A big thing that's really, really relevant, slavery aside, we won't go into that, is like just the topic of like Nazism, you know? People will throw around Nazi big buzzwords as in like, you know, and be very, very ashamed. Like I talked to some people who are here and they're like, oh, I'm ashamed to be German. I'm ashamed to be this. Sometimes you have to remind people, not just with culture, but with history, like not every German person was a Nazi. And that being said, Nazis invaded Germany first before they, you know, went and invaded Poland and Austria and France and all of that. And that's the problem with identity politics, is some people can't see the difference in that you might have been of German descent, but you're not a Nazi, and you don't have to apologize on behalf of your people or whatever as a result. It's just a really, really interesting aspect of like who bears personal responsibility throughout history. But it's so much of what is being indoctrinated in schools that it's like I don't blame a lot of these white liberals running around feeling responsible for stealing culture off of people when, you know, like that's been done throughout history for hundreds of years. I mean, if we want to talk Nazis for a second, the Japanese people did exactly what the Nazis did at the same time, but they did it to Indo-Chinese Muslims, Russians, Chinese, Koreans, Singapore. Like that's the thing, is like we're taught Pearl Harbor and everything, but we're only taught Pearl Harbor up to the point where America got attacked. What you're not taught is the fact that the Japanese people were the equivalent of the Nazis in the East, because of a lot of, in the name of Japanese expansion and Japanese imperialism. But no one talks about that, you know? Asians aren't the oppressing type, but Japanese people oppressed people.
Oh, totally. No, and, you know, that's why, you know, different Asian countries, they have so much animosity toward each other because of war. And a lot of the Taiwanese, the older Taiwanese generations, they hate Japanese people.
Of course.
Them
Japanese people
because they were occupied by
oppressors. And the thing is, I don't have a problem with Japanese people, but here's the thing: you're not taught that Hirohito was a dictator, but he was. And like we talk about Stalin and Hitler and Mao all the time. Hirohito is another one, and like no one ever talks about that. No one ever talks about the fact that the Japanese enslaved, raped, pillaged Chinese people, Koreans, Russians even. I mean, all in the name of expansion, because they were an empire up until 60 years ago. Literally.
They don't, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but they don't talk about the Moors and how the Moors, occupied Spain for like 700 years. But see, it's dangerous because it's to divide, or not to divide, but to conquer and to take land. It's an issue of the human condition. And I think it's easier to kind of control people if you have just a narrative that it's this one, this one race of people.
Or one race of people solely responsible for oppression.
Then you can put all that anger and that responsibility onto them. And then you can program people with the mentality, well, if you just get rid of this one, race of people, then we'll have peace and harmony. We'll have our utopia.
But like right there, that is the definition of like a nationalist state. And as a matter of fact, that's how enemies are created within the state, is the cater to the inherent bias. Right now, what the Democrats do to people is they make white people very, very self-hating. That's how you essentially start the process of making people feel inadequate over time, convincing people, even within your own sect, your own neighbors, that you are being victimized and you're a problem. I mean, that's how. Yeah, like this is all proven in history. This is what Stalin did in Russia. You know what he did? He took away everything from the people and then he fed them. You know what I mean? He got a whole group of people to think a certain way, act a certain way, behave a certain way because of politics, because of what he was pushing forward. And at the end of the day, he fed all of his citizens because he kind of kept them. But that's what I'm trying to say. It's like that's what the Democrats do to people. It's like you don't really do anything, and you give everybody just the bare minimum so you can retain your vote. Now, granted, America is not. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, America's not a socialist state the same way Russia would have been, or Russia had been in the past. But you can see so many closely knitted parallels with people, and unfortunately, because of universities and all that, you're not taught that. You're absolutely not taught a lot of those aspects of socialism. You may have studied Karl Marx and all that kind of stuff from a Western standpoint, but like, you don't have to study something, or you can look at examples in history to see how something has been fundamentally flawed. I mean, every giant country has failed in that regard. Sweden, that's different, but Sweden has the population of Memphis. So it's not the same thing. You can't draw the same comparison with Sweden as you can with a country this size. It just doesn't work.
Well, with their immigration issues now and their policies, it's starting to fail because now they're going down because of that.
Sweden having issues, but
they're mostly homo. What do you call it when it's like one race of people before the immigration?
Homogenous.
Homogenous.
Yeah.
But it's also
Can I say one thing?
No.
What's up?
You're so polite for me because I have to mess with you.
Nah, it's cool. Okay, so I'm glad that you brought up Japan, because a lot of people don't know about that, and we talked about Hitler. But see, a lot of people don't know that that there were radical Islamic terrorists back then that aided Hitler in exterminating the Jews, and you could just look it up. But I think it was called Husseini, the Husseini Brigade or whatever. But the whole problem that we have right now with radical Islamic terrorism goes way back, and since people don't know the different aspects of what happened back then, they like you said, they narrow it down to one race. This is why we're having problems repeat.
Yeah, and that's the true thing is, think about most of the liberal problems in America, right? At the end of the day, what liberals will always say is, at the end of the day, it all just comes down to white people. It comes down to white people being the reason for all the problems because of colonialism, because of white supremacy, because of all that kind of stuff. When we talk about history and we talk about countries that have conquered each other over time, Mongolians, the Japanese, the Chinese, like, It's the same deal, and you see the same intolerance even in other countries. I mean, the reason why I'm glad you know about Japan. The reason why I bring up Japan and I don't talk about it much is because Japan is very, very contemporary. It's as early as 60 years ago. You know, Hirohito's son is still the emperor of Japan. Like, that's very, very fresh. Japanese expansion, Japanese imperialism is very real. You know, oppression and intolerance of other races. So a lot of liberals will always come to the table and say, well, white people are the only people who colonized, you know, many, many different territories throughout history and oppressed people. And I'm thinking Japan was doing that 50 years ago. In the like, that's why, like, you know, that Japanese imperial sign, the rising sun or whatever, a lot of people equate that to the SS, to the Nazi symbol. It essentially represented the same thing. If you weren't Japanese, we're just going to take your land. So they invaded all of Southeast Asia. They invaded China, Manchuria at the time, parts of Russia. And if, you know, if Japan wasn't stopped, I will say this on the air, if Japan wasn't stopped, they essentially would have emerged as the equivalent of what the Nazis were trying to do with the Third Reich out in Europe. Japan was doing that in the East, all in the name of expansion and imperialism. But we're not taught that. We're not taught that Japanese people oppress people, because it's like, well, you know, Asians aren't.
Well, we're not taught that African tribes like beat up other.
Well, that's
African
what I'm saying.
tribes and take their
When you
land,
start
and
to,
Native
when you
American
start to bear
tribes.
the responsibility amongst a lot of other people, all of a sudden it weakens one race of people. Then not just one race of people is solely responsible for all the oppression in the world.